Today we're going to cover the cannon piece in Chess Titans. The cannon piece is a super unique piece that is a rook replacement. This piece can actually shoot over pieces and has the same movement pattern as a rook does. We're super excited to get into the strategies on this piece. It gets really unique. But before we do that, if this is your first time to Chess Titans, what actually is Chess Titans? Chess Titans lets you swap out and upgrade your pieces for new pieces that have different abilities. And they don't just look different, they move differently. So for example, this is a squire piece that you can replace your pawn with. A pawn attacks at an angle and moves forward, and the squire moves at an angle and attacks forward. It creates entirely new strategies just by simple movement patterns and new abilities. And we have an exciting piece that we're going to talk about today, the strategy of this piece, how to defend this piece, which is the cannon piece. This piece can literally shoot over other pieces. So what does this mean? We're going to go over a couple different examples here. One example is the opening where you get aggressive with your cannon right away. The squire, as we just said, moves at an angle, so you can open up your squire here, and then your cannon has this direct line where you can literally take their rook in the first move if they don't respond. This turns out to be a trade, but we're going to go over a couple different scenarios here. So the first scenario, you make this move happen, and this is the threat, and this is what it looks like. What'll happen is the cannon actually moves to this piece and then can fire over. So let's say they move just like this, we can go ahead and take that piece. So what this actually looks like is the cannon will move up here and then we'll take the piece. So the cannon stays still, it stays where it is, and can launch over. This creates some really unique stuff that we're going to talk about later where the cannon can control the center of the board, but for now we're going to go over a couple of opening strategies. Now, of course, this, as we said, is just a trade, right? Their pawn is going to come in and it's going to take our cannon back right away as soon as we make that trade. So just to cover, the cannon moves up and has to stay still, but takes the piece that's over another piece. It makes it a little bit different from, you might be thinking of this as a knight. A knight can jump over pieces, but the cannon shoots over pieces and stays where it is. So let's cover a couple other examples here. So you noticed in the last opening, we moved our pawn up 1. Now we're going to move our pawn up 2, and we're going to cover what this actually helps us do. So now what we're seeing here is this squire is attacking this piece here. So if a pawn tries to move here, we'll take that pawn. So let's say that they open with something else. We'll say c5, and they try to get cheeky with their openings. What we're going to do here, and they're just not defending this, we're going to move this out here. And now what we've created is the ability to defend this to move across this entire lane. And not only are we moving across this entire lane, but you'll probably notice that we can attack any piece on their back line except for this piece because our squire's in the way. And even if we wanted to, we can move our squire out of the way to attack that piece. But really what we're doing here is this powerful movement that allows us to move to any of these pieces and no matter what they move out, we're going to be able to attack it. So let's say that they move here, we're going to be in attacking position. Now one thing that's important to note is, let's say that this is the move that they do, this is what they choose to do, and so we move our cannon to this spot here. The cannon can only attack in the direction that it moves. So the cannon would only be able to attack this square if we stopped here. So if you move here in the game, the cannon's just going to stop. And then in the next move, you're going to be able to attack this pawn. And the way that you attack this pawn is the cannon would actually just stay still. You don't move it. The way that this looks like in the game is when you click the cannon, you're going to be able to attack this pawn right away. And if you do this, you take this pawn off the board in your next move. In their next move, they have to defend their king. They're in a position here where the next move we do could move here and then take the king. This is all in one move. We move and attack in the same move. So if we do this, then that's checkmate. So they have to prevent against this. So what they would do is something like the queen here or the bishop here instead. And what we can do here, it gets pretty interesting because when we're in this position, I'm trying to see, it might actually be a forced checkmate here because we can move here, and then at this point we take this piece. Okay, so it's not a forced checkmate, because we can move there, take this piece. We would get a free piece though, and then they would be able to move out of the way. But if the rook is here where it's almost smothered, they can move here. We'll be able to take this queen too in the next move because they have to defend this king. They could also move this here. So the result is the same no matter what. We're going to move up here and we're going to get a free piece out of this. Next thing they have to do is they have to move here, and then we would take here as well. So the knight moving would not be a good idea for them. They would have to move their bishop here because they don't want to lose their queen. We would get a free piece by taking this, and then their king can move out of the way to safety. Even if we decide to move here, the defense against the cannon is to move a piece directly in front of it because the cannon cannot move forward anymore, and so the cannon can only attack this square here. And this will come in handy too because we're going to show this defense and how that's a common way to do this. So to kind of go back to the initial example, here what a lot of players will do that you'll find is we're threatening this piece here, right, as we kind of went over, is what our threat looks like. But let's say that they move on the first move. They don't want their rook to be taken, so they'll move this up here. If they're using squires, then they'll move their squire out here because they can move at an angle, and then now they have this squire will be protecting this knight will be protecting this piece, and this bishop is protecting this piece. So there's a lot of pressure on here to prevent against the cannon being able to do this. But the beauty of this opening is the ability to attack across this line. So as you saw here, kind of this play that we got into was very quickly, we became in control and started taking pieces just by taking our cannon out. So we bring our cannon out and we can move along this entire 3-file here, which is such a powerful, advantageous position to be in. And by having the squire, which is more agile, we can bounce around and create more openings. The squire and the assassin coupled with the cannon is so powerful to have that ability. Now let's go over some other forced situations here. What we're going to see here is we have our cannon out, we've got our bishop out, and what we want to do in our next move is move here. So we're not attacking, we're just moving here. But what we're doing is we're now threatening the king. So the king here is in check. And there's a couple things they could do. They could, in theory, move their knight, but then we're just going to take it on the next turn, and then they're going to be in the same exact position. As soon as we take it, they're in threat. They're in check. So what they'll have to do here is they have to move their pawn. No matter what, even if they move here first, we take it, the next move they have to move their pawn, because this would be gone. And so you're probably noticing here what the end result of this looks like. Yeah, they protected their king, but they did not protect their queen. And that's where our advantage is here, where we forced this opening, where we forced them to create this position where they move here, and then our next move, we're going to take this queen right off the bat. This is the situation where and then they'll most likely take here and get out of danger. And then if we wanted to, we could try threatening more positions. But now, it's not necessarily worth it to do this because they're just going to move back. And we're better off attacking different, developing our pieces a little bit more. What you'll find is the more that black or white, depending on whoever you're using with the cannon, keeps their pieces undeveloped, the more situations you're creating where you can do smothered mates and forced positions. There's a lot you can do with the cannon piece from opening position. And a lot of it extends from, if you're able to get the rook out quickly and along this file, there's a lot you can do with it. The disadvantage of a catapult is if your opponent is using squires. A lot of those situations that we talked about where the defense is to move up, well, when they're moving up with a squire, what that actually looks like, I know I'm just using pawns here, but the squire will move here, and then the squire is threatening to take right away. So the squire is really going to be forcing this to move around a lot, and because it's not a normal rook that can just take pieces, we're going to have to bounce around a good bit. So that is that's the cannon. A lot of different opening options there to consider. What we're going to go over next, though, is the ability to do things like force an attack on a queen. So let's say that we start out when we do squire to c4, and they respond by defending with their knight to c6. So this really doesn't defend this exactly, but if we take here, we'll just take with a pawn, and their knight just covers a bit of the board. It's a common opening that you'll tend to see. We're going to bring our rook out to be on this file here, and let's say that from this position, let's say they open up here with another knight, and the first thing we'll do is we'll threaten their queen. So we could go after the king here, but what we're going for is the queen in this scenario. So what they have to do is start opening up their position, and then we can bounce around, attack their king immediately after. And what you're probably starting to notice is we're in control of the game here of what we can do. We're going to be attacking the knight after this, like forcing movement around that they wouldn't expect. We're in control of the game. So there's a lot we could do with the rook, and keep in mind, you have to move it directly where you're going to attack. But where this rook becomes really powerful too is if it can control the center. As you can see here, the rook, without moving from this position, can attack. And I highlighted yellow to show the yellow spots that this rook can attack, orange to show the orange-red spots that this rook can attack. So the catapult has the ability to shoot other pieces by staying in the same spot, which means that you're able to control a lot of the board, and this doesn't even show the half of it. Really what the rook is controlling, what the catapult is controlling, is all of these squares. If you're able to have two rooks in the center, it's such a powerful spot to be, because if the rook moves, it can take this square, right? If this catapult moves here, it can take this piece. If it moves here, it can take this one. If it stays still, it can take this one. So you cover almost the entire board, it seems, with two catapults in the center. So if you can keep your catapults alive, a lot of people are probably going to dive bomb their catapults right away, where you end up in this position and you get taken by either squire or knight. But in the position where you're able to keep these until the end game, you'll find that it's extremely advantageous to do so. Another thing that I want to cover here that will be important as you get your elo up and you start seeing more and more pieces that you don't traditionally see at lower elo states, which is the mimic piece. So let's go ahead, go into here, and let's just delete these, and we're going to cover the mimic. If you're not a high elo yet, you might as well stick around, and we're going to show what the situation looks like here if you're not using the squire, if you're not using the assassin, and you're not using the pawn. If you're using the squire, the assassin, or the pawn, defending the catapult is easy because you're able to take it right away. However, if you're using let's say here, let's take out these because you can take with the rook. If you have a poor combination of pieces, something like a Pegasus that can't jump pieces, and you're using mimics, the situation that you're running into here is when you move the catapult out and you take this piece, nothing can take the catapult right now. So defending it with the mimic is much more difficult to do. So what you have to do if you're using a catapult, if you're using something like this situation, right? Catapult comes in, and the reason this is, by the way, if you're not familiar with the mimic attacks side to side. And if the mimic can take a piece, it turns into that piece. So you definitely don't want your mimic to turn into that piece, which is actually interesting. Something that I had not thought of until just now that would be pretty sneaky is if you're using mimics, what you should do is you open this file up, you move the mimic here as the defense. The only way this can take is if it moves here. And the result of this would be the catapult takes, right? Because it has to move, it has to have this square empty, it can't move here, then it wouldn't be able to attack. It has to move 2 squares away to attack. And then the opponent would take this piece with the mimic, take your catapult, and then it would get your catapult, and it would be up 5 points right away. That's really smart. Not something I thought of. I'll tell you the defense I was going to share just in case it's helpful. But what you could do, clearly that's the better option, I think, now that I'm looking at it, because you're also, in this case, threatening this rook is threatening to take this. So now you're putting the opponent on defense here. And then maybe you want to do this as a defense if you're not going to take, because why would you take in this situation? You would lose your catapult, it would turn into theirs. This way, this piece is threatening the squire. So if the rook takes, you take back, and you'd be on top, you'd have the advantage. Now, just to go back to this to show the other example. So this is probably your best defense here, but the other defense is moving your mimic out, then when they move their catapult up and take, then the bishop can take here. So just a couple of examples of openings you could do and defenses to those openings. There's a lot you could do with the catapult. It's such a powerful piece. It's different than the trebuchet. The trebuchet has more options of attacking, but the problem with the trebuchet is that it can't attack forward. So if you're on the sides of the board, it's a little bit limiting. It's harder to guide the trebuchet than it is the catapult to take certain pieces. If you want to learn more about the trebuchet, check out our other videos. We're excited that you're here. Appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next video.